invite all marketeers to consider this sweet spot that combines the evolving needs of your customer and what really drives them, and your authentic internal purpose of your organization. And if you can make those cross over in a beautiful way, that's where you've got real magic to take a proposition to market.
Hello everyone. Can it really be episode 3 of our Brand Bites podcast? Today we are talking all things joined up brand journeys. And to help us do precisely that, we are joined by our very own, the lovely Andy Weir, Chief Client Officer here at Ride Shotgun, and Lee Morton, Head of Brand and Proposition Development at Arco, the UK's leading PPE suppliers and safety experts, and a long-standing client of Ride Shotgun. Lee has very kindly agreed to talk us through Arco's brand experience in practice, including how they've gone about creating a joined-up brand journey for Arco, what are the pitfalls and the challenges, and also the ways in which they've seen it work wonders for their marketing, and not to mention the wider business too. Get ready for a lively chat filled with insights, laughs, and maybe a surprise or two. Let's rock and roll. Hello.
Good morning.
How are you?
Really well, thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
having
much
me.
for coming today. I know that trains and logistics and diaries, it's always a challenge. We
All
really
good.
appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Do you want to give us a super quick introduction to yourself?
Sure, happy to do so. As you pointed out, I'm currently with a company called Arco, but actually my career spans some time and started out in science, actually. So I was a scientist, started out working on oils and fuels for BP and Castrol, the lubricant company. Got myself quite specialist, actually, became a tribologist, if you're familiar with tribology. So the
Not a
study
role
of
I'm familiar with.
friction and making kind of cars and bikes go faster. So started my career there, did my stint kind of making racing cars go faster for Castrol, and ultimately saw this opportunity where, you know, the complex world of what was happening inside an engine, the kind of the high speeds, the high temperatures, people were trying to translate that into a consumer story, a benefit for the customer, and to kind of make a brand story out of it. And that wasn't happening. And I kind of saw that as my opportunity to get into marketing. So hence the kind of change in direction, and brought me here.
And here you are.
Indeed.
And Andy, obviously I know you.
Yep.
I know that deep down you wish you played for Manchester United.
Yep.
But do you want to give us a little bit of background?
Or a
about you?
superstar DJ.
Or a superstar DJ. We've just established what your name would be as well.
So yeah, little bit about me. I'm Chief Client Officer at Ride Shotgun, which means first and foremost, I'm responsible for the client services team, so the team that look after our wonderful clients such as Arco. Also, I'm responsible for the strategy team and the digital marketing team at Ride Shotgun. Prior to setting up Ride Shotgun, I'm one of the founding partners and directors of Ride Shotgun. I set up an agency in 2010, a brand activation, strategic brand activation agency, which I ran for 12 years before we setting up Ride Shotgun. That agency was an award-winning agency. You know, we won several kind of awards, in fact, with Arco for effectiveness for the marketing. We won awards for being one of the best agencies to work for, and in fact, we're named one of the best agencies in the North in 2018. As well as that, I am very passionate about marketing, about creativity, about people, about leadership. About Man United, about house music, about bright, colourful socks, and my family as well. I'm a husband and a dad of 2, 3 if you count a Hungarian Vizsla called Eric.
He's the favourite child, right?
He's saying nothing. So yeah, and really, kind of really proud to be here today and join you in this conversation along with Lee.
Cool. Thank you for coming. I feel like I've got the power to ask you anything. Who's your favourite account director? I'm joking. So, Andy, spill the beans. What exactly is a joined-up brand journey, and why is it so crucial in today's marketing landscape?
put simply, a joined-up brand journey is making sure that wherever a brand shows up, it shows up consistently, and interacts with its audiences in the same way, in the right way each time, to ensure that it gives itself the greatest chance for success. Digging a little bit deeper beyond that, ultimately all brands are on some kind of journey, whether it's right at the beginning of that journey, when it's about definition and proposition and messaging frameworks to really kind of capture what it is that it stands for and why it's different and why it matters. Whether it's in a stage where it needs to kind of unite the business and get its customers to understand what it stands for, or it's about building awareness, or it's about connecting and engaging with customers, or ultimately kind of converting them. At each of those stages, it's really important that the brand is present and consistent to ensure that at each stage you kind of maximize the opportunity for brand success. So and kind of marketers and brand managers kind of appreciate that and appreciate each of those stages, but increasingly, modern marketers today are faced with some really tough challenges. First and foremost, that brands need to show up on more channels and in more places than ever before.
Definitely.
Increasingly, budgets are scrutinized and expected to kind of go further and achieve more. And often what happens is that the kind of the organisations are under an awful lot of pressure to get results in short term
with smaller budgets.
And often that can be at the expense of the brand. Joined up brand journeys is very much about ensuring that that activity, the tactical activity, can be successful by building on a brand platform which will ensure greater success.
Yeah, definitely. And Lee, coming to you, can you share kind of your thoughts on what a joined up brand journey means to you, and why is it so crucial to Arco?
And just kind of playing off what Andy described, which I don't disagree with, but it is really easy for us to try and see the logic in a brand journey with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But actually, when we've researched the actual need states of customers and where they're at, you never find that they're at a particular point in a journey, or perhaps they'll surprise you about where they're at in that journey. And whilst we'd love to be able to tell an end-to-end story that has that beautifully crafted beginning, middle, and an end, I couldn't agree more that the consistency in your story is really important, and that actually you're telling the story all the way along, because wherever that customer joins it, you need to be able to show your value and to tell your story. And you can't afford to simply go back to the beginning. You just have to make sure that every touch point is, aiming towards the same direction and the same message that you want to convey. But of course, you're conveying in a different, through a different channel or through different means, something that addresses the particular point that the customer or the consumer is at in their journey with your brand.
Yeah, and I think obviously touching on, the different kind of platforms and the different kind of areas for content is just one of the challenges. What would you say the other challenges are that you're facing in terms of, making sure that a joined up brand journey is a success?
Well, I guess that so the market that we're in is mature in some respects, in that keeping people safe has been around since eternity. However, the market itself, in terms of its structure and the number of competition, for example, the competitors out there, highly fragmented. Lots of small organisations providing a very local, specific service about one aspect of keeping people safe in the workplace. But actually what the customer needs, when you just dig a little bit deeper in terms of this, looking after people from a cultural safety perspective, from a training and an understanding of how you can prevent accidents happening in the first place, right the way through to the provision of products that might protect someone if they do come in harm's way, right the way through to beyond that, and the kind of mental well-being and safety and occupational health. There's actually so many aspects to keeping someone in great shape that these many small niche players run the risk of not being able to join those dots.
Yeah.
And so it leaves someone exposed. If a customer is buying from a number of different places for many different services, if those services don't join up, you haven't actually got a holistic means of keeping the person and the company safe.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big challenge for anyone in our industry. And it's led us down a certain path to try to solve that. But that's kind of one of the big challenges out there.
Yeah, and I think from a outside of or beyond your sector, there are some kind of common themes really from a brand and marketing perspective, and the way that brands work with multiple agencies and the role of kind of multiple agencies. I'm thinking particularly of the fact that many clients, if you like, will have lots of different agencies who fulfill or experts in lots of different disciplines.
Sure.
And to ensure that you are, whether you're making the most out of your events, you're optimized when it comes to kind of marketing online, but that kind of brand integrity, making sure that narrative exists throughout everything that you do across every single channel is really, really important, in a similar way to what you're saying there about that kind of joined up proposition when it comes to safety. And I think it's Arco is obviously has been around for an awful long time and is in an enviable position to be in the market leader and able to fulfill all of those things. But when people are increasingly under pressure from a cost perspective, a time perspective, it does often your customers and marketers are put under pressure to kind of compromise some of those elements around brand or a joined up safety journey.
Yeah, and has these challenges changed over the years, or have they fundamentally always been there? Have you noticed? Have you stumbled across new challenges? As talk about mental health, that's obviously a conversation that's a lot more kind of open these days. Have you noticed patterns changing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the market changes, the requirements change. I mean, if we dig a little bit into the history of the company I'm working with, so we've got 140 years of heritage, so they're obviously doing something right. They've continued to evolve and grow, and we're very proud of that heritage. Still a family-owned company, and it's needed to evolve. So it came out of a background of industrial supplies, so making things from rubber, making gaskets and things generally for an evolving industrial landscape. And then I think one of the big changes in direction, and it turns out to be the opportunity that presented itself for our brand around the late 60s as the fishing industry in Hull grew. So Arco is a Hull-based company in Yorkshire, and the fishing industry is a very dangerous environment, as you might imagine. It still is, but particularly then. And so safety was becoming an increasing issue, actually spotted and championed by a group of women who realised that it was so dangerous that their loved ones were out there. And there was a particular disaster in the late 60s, triple trawler disaster, which lost many lives. And so this revolution kind of that was driven, a safety revolution by these three really strong women, the headscarf revolutionaries as they've become to be known, that kind of drove awareness of kind of the need for improved safety across industries. And then just a few years later, kind of the men eventually caught up and kind of made legislation out of it. So the 1974 Health and Safety at Work Act, so 50 years old this year, actually led to a huge improvement in safety across the industrial landscape of the UK, and we saw that as an opportunity to become specialists.
Right.
So instead of being a general industrial supplier, of which there are many and there are needs out there, of course, but we found this wonderful purpose emerging out of this to keep people safe in the workplace and to turn those manufacturing techniques for industrial supplies into something, safety equipment and things that kept people safe. So born out of that change and that evolution, that awareness that there's this, need to keep people safe, became our purpose.
Yeah. And how do you think that will change in the future as we go forward?
Well, it's changing so rapidly. I think that the consciousness that people have now about the changing environment, literally, the planet, and the need to keep the planet safe has driven our proposition.
Yep.
We're very conscious that we still, at the heart of things, protect people, but in doing that, you can save a whole bunch of potential costs for your customers.
Yeah.
So our proposition ladders through keeping people safe, keeping businesses safe, and then ultimately keeping the planet safe. And we have to think on that kind of different hierarchy of stakeholders that ultimately we think we can add value. And so, yeah, the organisation has evolved, our capabilities have evolved, and our focus has evolved, along with, our customers. So it's only through listening to their needs evolving that you see those opportunities.
Of course.
And, over the last 5 to 10 years, of course, sustainability and generally looking after the planet has become such, a hot topic for many customers, particularly the larger ones who are perhaps a little step ahead of smaller businesses. And we think that we've got, some solutions to support that too.
Definitely. And obviously, as an agency and on this podcast today, we're talking about the benefits of having a joined up brand journey. But if we kind of twisted that and we said, what are the downfalls of not having an integrated or joined up brand journey? What would you say those downfalls are?
I think there's a risk it leaves some gaps in thinking, and ultimately then gaps in whatever service or provision you're looking for. So, when you it's an interesting story about how brands kind of try to develop their role in life. And there's a lot of agency partners who tell a story of developing a brand inside out. And there's something in that I do think you have to be honest to your purpose. And, we're fortunate enough, as I hopefully described, that we've got this beautiful purpose in our organisation that we've had for many, many years. There's company now scrambling around looking for that purpose. But the danger in doing so is that you do become very self-centred and self-oriented. And we ourselves have been guilty of that. When we first developed our positioning, kind of through the 70s, 80s and beyond, as experts in safety, it's a little bit self-centred. Now, the big danger there is that you're not looking at the evolving needs of the marketplace and the customer.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a beautiful gap closing that we've been able to do. And I'd invite all marketeers to consider this sweet spot that combines the evolving needs of your customer and what really drives them, and your authentic internal purpose of your organisation. And if you can make those cross over in a beautiful way, that's where you've got real magic to take a proposition to market. And I think, that's the risk. The risk is there's a gap, either a gap in what the organisation is trying to offer to the marketplace, or a gap in what the customer needs and it's not being fulfilled, or they try to fill those gaps with a number of small sticking plasters instead of an overall holistic solution to whatever their need is. It doesn't, it's not just about, provision of marketing services or the provision of safety. It's about, if you imagine a kind of healthcare professional trying to look after patients, kind of you wouldn't want one person diagnosing, then another one prescribing, and then another one caring. It really is beautiful when actually all those things are done by one, family of healthcare professionals that come together. And so, those gaps are a risk.
And how can businesses implement a joined up brand journey? What advice would you give?
Notwithstanding what I described about the non-linear nature of a brand journey, because it isn't, you can at least start to build your story and make sure that you don't leave gaps in the provision of whatever service you're providing the marketplace. So I think understanding your capabilities and what you can credibly bring to market
Yeah.
understanding what is motivating to the marketplace, understand your competitors as well and what they bring, and look for the white space. And there's a role of research, of course, in all of this,
Yeah.
understanding those white spaces where competitors are not going to operate, and finding your role in the market and filling that. So I think that there is a bit of science into this art that we call marketing, increasingly so, of course, with kind of how data and research rules many of our decisions. But yeah, I think go back to the science.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where'd you start? Is it what you've just said, going back to the science?
I think so. I'd
Yeah.
start with research, start
Yeah.
with your customer,
Yeah.
and kind of look what their needs are looking like and how they're evolving, how it changes.
And how would you say, how do you know they're doing it right?
I think we have to be honest and allow the market to judge our brand, and do that impartially. Again, I see research developed and not developed in the way that it should be, and it biases a certain outcome and a certain decision. And really try to stay impartial about your perceived ownership of your brand. There's a beautiful story, and I don't know if Andy recalls, but maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when we'd started a particular kind of creative process with your agency at the time, Andy. And I happened to be out for a bit of a holiday, and one of the family members of our company stepped in to see what they could find out about this branding agency that had been kicking around for a couple of years, doing some good work for us, but they wanted to dig a little bit deeper. We had a big investment play to take a brand story to market. And so these guys were put on the spot a little bit. And so this rather senior stakeholder in our business throws the story as he kind of puffs his chest out, thinking, Lee's on holiday, he doesn't own the brand anyway. So kind of threw the question to you guys, so who do you think owns this brand? You think, and really interesting answer, and not just placating this senior stakeholder, but the creative mind of the agency at the time, a great guy called Bew Knox. He said, well, actually, the customer and the consumer owns your brand. It's what they think that matters. They're the ones that really take the decisions here.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it did him many favors at the time, but it was absolutely the right answer. Of course, we really need to wake up to that and recognize that we can try to craft a narrative, but a story only lives in the mind of the audience and the recipient. And if you don't tell that story beautifully, it's actually what your brand only exists.
Yeah, I think
minds,
you ultimately get found out. It has to be authentic, and founded in that truth that the organisation truly believes and stands for, and that customer need. And if you get those things right, then it certainly makes everything an awful lot easier. If you're not authentic in what your brand stands for and what it means, and it's trying to be something that it's not, then ultimately you get found out.
You get caught out always,
More so now than ever. We had
Absolutely,
a conversation yesterday, so we're bringing on board a lead copy person within our business, and we were talking about the role of SEO, which of course we all know is important technically and for many good reasons, but ultimately writing great copy, writing great stories and having authenticity come through it will win out. It will win out, because that's really what the algorithms are looking for. They're looking for great engaging content that tells the story that you're best at telling. And we can get a little bit technical with trying to tell that story to win win search, but actually if you let the authenticity come through, you just tell great stories and tell them in a way that's engaging and relevant to your audience, that's going to win out in the end.
Engage them. Yeah, definitely. So Lee, obviously Arco worked with Ride Shotgun for over 10 years now. I'm keen to understand how you brought your brand story to life.
Sure, we can go into that. And we started off trying to craft this brief to tell the story that we were the trusted experts in safety, and we thought that was the brief. And actually, when bringing that to agency partners, we had, of course, many pitches that did exactly that. And the pitch from Ride Shotgun was actually quite different. It was one that said, we're just going to pause on this and dissect the brief a little bit first, because we don't feel that there's much of the actual customer in this brief. It was a little bit, self-centered.
Yeah.
And I think it was a very fair challenge, and one that we need and we value, because any, brief, and we get so many briefs coming into our own internal studio, and 90% of briefs just really need reworking. And, so we had the opportunity to have that brief really torn apart and interrogated. And your team started to dig underneath that and said, okay, forget about for a moment the story that Arco want to tell. What do the customers really need?
Yeah.
And that's when we started to dig in. Well, what happens when you do keep someone safe? Because that's your purpose. So there's some authenticity in telling the story about how you keep them safe. But what does that enable? And this is where we started hunting into some real rich territory. And your creative started to dig deeper. They sensed that we were on the edge of something. And that's when the real brief then emerged. And the story we really needed to tell is about how we enabled someone to live their life to the full.
Yep.
Because actually, if you do keep them safe, they just want to return home at the end of that working day in the same condition that they came to work, feeling as good, feeling as healthy, and ultimately with all their, fingers, toes, bones, eyes, ears, all intact. Now, of course, we knew we had all the products that did that, but that's when, this wonderful idea of, put the product aside. It's not just safety gear. It's getting you home safe at the
emotion.
end of the day. It is. It's that emotive side. And in terms of that measurement of how do we know we've hit that, because an emotive story is difficult to measure. And ultimately, we, as Andy alluded to earlier, we got some great accolades for that. The B2B marketing were on the brink of realizing that, B2B customers are humans, and the emotive story can work just as well in B2B as it can in the consumer space. So whatever it was, 8-10 years ago, kind of we won that best brand campaign for that emotive story of keeping people safe. So
That's amazing.
We talked about that kind of, I think 2 points really to what Lee mentions there, the importance of the brief and making sure that we talk about this in the business quite a lot. Let's just not accept that kind of client brief. Let's challenge that brief. What's behind that brief? How's the brief come about? And then, once what it is that we've been asked to create has been produced, what is the next step? What do we hope that is going to achieve? Because really that is at the heart of the brief. And I think all too often briefs are quite kind of descriptive based on the thing that we're being asked to create, as opposed to the genuine shift in feeling or behavior that we're trying to kind of motivate and make happen. And then the second thing really is that point around, flipping that kind of that ultimately, yes, this is safety gear, this is what we sell, but it is the feeling you get when that has done its job is ultimately what's important to the customers and what we're trying to capture.
Definitely.
So the fact that the product of what Arco sells and sold at the time is ultimately that kind of positive enabler.
Yeah.
I can go to work and be more confident that at the end of the day I'll be able to come home safe, or go and have a kickabout in the park with my mates, or go to the pub or whatever those things are that are really important to to people, and it isn't one thing, it's all of those things. So if you can kind of capture that essence, then when it comes to, we talked about this earlier, when it comes to kind of buying products and buying health and safety gear, who are you going to buy it from? Are you going to buy it from the guys that are selling it for the cheapest price and the quickest delivery, or are you going to buy it from the guys that actually recognise that the reason why I'm buying this is because I need to keep myself
show them in the workplace? It's a bit stereotyped to simply show where those products are being used, but what kind of the agency helped us do is show what it enabled, show the people after their kind of day's work and what that allowed them to then go on and enjoy, and that was where the beauty of the campaign came. And it does remind me, there was another similar example where that we thought we wanted to tell a story about product quality.
Yeah.
And ultimately we did. So we'd done the diligent research that had shown that the number one thing that drives decision making in this industry is about the quality and reliability of the products. So we figured we need to just tell that story. But actually you guys challenged us and had this whole kind of ethos at the time of challenging thinking, which, you know, we'll maybe come back to, kind of why certain agencies can make it work and some perhaps may not. But ultimately you challenged the fact that we may have a story to tell about product quality, but so what? Because aren't all products of good quality?
Yeah.
Isn't all safety equipment going to keep people safe? Because that's what it's designed to
think so.
do, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But then that made us look a little bit deeper and say, well, are they all safe? And now we had invested in a laboratory to test products, and we put various products through that testing and ultimately stumbled on an incredibly deep insight that surprisingly many products that are out there to keep someone safe are inherently not safe themselves.
Oh my God, that's
and they were
interesting.
putting people in harm's way.
Wow.
And it was only through that challenging thinking that said, you know, what really is the problem you're trying to solve here, that got us digging more deeply and found that there was a real problem out there. And that was a huge insight that gave us this chance to go to market with a message of assurance, but we reminded people, or actually brought to life the fact that there is a problem out there, one that you may not perceive. So it's a real thought leadership play, actually.
Yeah, I think that kind of that drive to really uncover those genuine insights, but again, behind the brief, and let's not take it for granted what we're being told, and genuinely, like you say, challenge it and kind of explore those assumptions that we have over certain things and go, actually, is that the case? You know, when you think about how, you know, particularly B2B marketing today, and there's obviously an awful lot of account-based marketing and challenger sales methodology, and really kind of putting a lot of effort in finding that genuine insight, you know, on what's really under the skin of the problem here, and you know, how can we kind of tap into that, or kind of expose something, which that story that Lee refers to genuinely did expose something that's so kind of, you know, enlightening or shocking or whatever that may be, that genuinely gets people to act. You know, you're just connecting on a really different level there. And the campaign that Lee's talking about, you know, this wasn't just you know, kind of brand to customer activity. You know, it actually was discussed in Parliament. So there's a whole kind of political aspect to this, really, that actually the products within which you know, Arco and its competitors were distributing and selling weren't perhaps as safe as one assumed that they were.
No. Which actually led to PR, which I suppose is always a positive thing as well.
Very true. And, you know, not just PR for the sake of it, but PR because you've got a genuine story that you need to be heard. In fact, only today, our local MP, Emma Hardy, is presenting a private members bill to raise awareness of the need for inclusive workwear and PPE. For far too long, there's been products on the market that are simply designed for guys. And then when, of course, we realise that there's an increasing manual workforce that needs protection that is women, and you know, that's 30% in many industries and rising, and all well, but the products are just simply not being designed specifically for women. Instead, many companies will just, you know, pink it and shrink it and then say that that's good for the women. Of course, it's far from being good. It's not developed for the women's form. And actually, it's not just women, but there are many groups that require specific needs, whether that's, you know, maternity wear, menopause wear. And anyway, we've kind of championed that cause along with Women in Construction, a really good body. And as I say, Emma Hardy's in Parliament today, kind of putting that members bill. So that's not a brand campaign. that is a campaign for good. This
Yeah.
is about being your authentic truth.
Yeah.
Keeping people safe in the workplace means getting something that fits the person.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they simply won't wear it,
Yeah.
or they won't comply, or
Exactly. And how was response internally to the Get Home Safe campaign? How did that go down internally?
Really well, actually. But it does raise another piece, because that joined up brand journey is not one that simply has to be externalized.
No.
It's one that your colleagues have to understand,
Yeah.
buy into, and champion.
Yeah.
And the kind of talking about where a brand journey might begin, the very first brief actually that we were putting around the marketplace that invited Ride Shotgun to begin working with us was an employer brand
Oh,
brief.
right.
Yes.
So, it wasn't a big kind of purpose brief that was an external big brand play. It was a very important one, but it was about engaging our people around this purpose
Yeah.
of keeping people safe at work. So it had been long respected that that's what we did, and there was real latent pride
Yeah.
in what people were a part of.
I can imagine.
But actually bringing that to life for them through some great imagery and through some inspiring language was the first gig that Ride Shotgun offered for Arco. So, if you had have planned, where we were on our journey, I don't think you would see the natural beginning of the story to be, we'll jump in and do some employer branding.
Yeah.
That's where you joined our story, because we were already on it. We've been going 140 years, as I say, so we're on a journey.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you join our journey.
Yeah.
Don't look for us to, to join yours.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And have there been kind of specific tactics that you found particularly successful in the collaboration with Ride Shotgun?
I think there have. I think that building that philosophy of making sure that every touch point sings your story was really important when we wanted to engage the whole sales force.
Yeah.
And when you've got a campaign that has a particularly strong insight, which is that products were not of the quality that they needed to be, it was no good just telling that story in the white paper or in Parliament or on a big brand campaign. We had so many rich touch points between our colleagues and the customer, the customer service team and our sellers that are out there in the market, winning new business and keeping our existing customers safe. So actually to get each of those empowered and trained to tell that story, a fundamentally, part of that success was the training of our colleagues. And it was a willingness, because they knew that this was all in the aim of, of keeping the customer safe, but they had this really powerful brand story now to do that with. So I think that just making sure that every telephone call, every message ladders up to that same brand promise is, a real key to success.
Definitely. Andy, kind of batting the same question to you, really, are there tactics that Ride Shotgun use that you have found particularly successful?
Yeah, I think with regards to the relationship with Arco, obviously it's been in place for well over 10 years, and I think there's obviously there's a huge benefit to that and a real strength to that, kind of building a relationship over that length of time, that you do really get to understand a brand and an organization and the people in it, really, and I think that knowledge and over time can help you be a real partner to a brand and a client, and really help that brand evolve. Equally, it can also be somewhat of a threat, because you've got to be careful that you aren't complacent and you don't fall into those kind of traps of just assuming that the phone's going to ring and that briefs are going to keep on coming. You've got to be kept on your toes. And I think what we talk about an awful lot in the agency is that just kind of reminding ourselves of the role of an agency, and we touched on this earlier. It's that not simply just responding to a brief and delivering what we've been asked to produce, but genuinely looking to to challenge the brief and to look to opportunities where you can add value, essentially to share or discuss the things that perhaps Lee and his team or other clients hadn't have thought of or weren't thinking that actually would give you greater chance for success, greater chance to stand out and be distinctive and differentiating in the way that you go about things. So, I think it's from a tactics perspective, it's kind of reminding ourselves of the role of an agency. We are that window on the world for the clients. We are that external point of view. We are, the people that we're thinking of your brand and treating it as our own, but we're also, have the fortunate position of doing that for lots of other brands and lots of other sectors and learning all sorts of things that, that really make people, whether it's internal audiences, external audiences, genuinely shift behaviours, buy things and evolve and change. And it's about sharing those things.
Andy, that self-awareness that it's upon the agency not to be complacent, I agree with entirely. However, there's also a requirement on your clients to keep you honest as well.
Yeah.
So, complacency can work in two ways, and we can relax into what we think we've succeeded in achieving. And actually, whilst you describe our relationship as well beyond 10 years, and it is, it's not one relationship of 10 years. So it's a number of kind of 1 to 2 year relationships, because we keep testing that relationship.
Yeah.
I'm not sure a marriage would quite kind of stand the kind of tests that we throw, but we do. We kind of ask you guys to pitch. And, what would hope to just be another brief coming across your desks is not always in that shape. No. It's in the shape of a pitch, because we need to make sure that we're being honest to our own company and to our customers to keep our thinking fresh, to keep our campaigns fresh. So actually, we do test the market and we test you guys, and it just so happens that you deliver each time. But none of us can be complacent. No. It's upon both parties to keep testing that and keep us both fresh.
Yeah, definitely. Keep us all busy.
True.
Okay, so we're going to finish with some fun questions now. So, if your brand had a soundtrack, what would be on it and why?
Oh, goodness. Soundtrack.
I love any question.
It's a fun question. Fun for who?
Fun for you.
Fun for you,
and me
maybe.
to judge.
So, actually, yes, there's a beautiful artist called Passenger, a folk artist, perhaps little known, but wonderful music, kind of acoustic music. And he has a song, The Long Road.
Right.
And whenever I'm discussing, brand versus short-term sales hit, and I discuss that a lot in my business, believe me, I'm an advocate, of course, of the right balance between those. I understand the role of them both, but far too often people dive for a short-term return, and it can be so tempting to do that when you see the initial ROI that your first journeys into digital marketing can do and deliver. But actually, without a brand behind it, without a solid story behind it, that soon runs out. And you do need an underlying brand story for your market to really buy into you as an organisation and the value you can bring. So the long road is all about that balance between the short-term commercial driving forces that we all live up to, but the long-term kind of authenticity the brand needs to keep.
Cool. No Westlife will take that?
Probably not, although I have sung a few Westlife ones in my time. That's another story.
And finally, we always ask our previous podcast guest to submit a question for our current guest. So the brilliant Marianne Shillingford, who's creative director at Dulux, has asked, does the colour choice for different types of PPE have any science or methodology behind it?
The colour choice? So yes, actually. I heard Marianne's podcast, by the way. It was superb.
She's
thanks,
amazing.
Marianne. It was wonderful. But colour plays a huge role. So there are some kind of more obvious ones, perhaps. So in high visibility clothing, it's designed that way for a reason. So we've got the fluorescent orange and the yellows to make sure that people are seen, because sadly still far too many people do lose their life being struck by vehicles and being struck by objects. So visibility is key. And of course, all those wonderful silvers that we have in the reflective tapes on workwear, that plays a key role. And then it starts to get quite nuanced, actually. So on rail, they discovered that the yellows of high visibility was blending into kind of the flora and fauna of the backgrounds, because quite often we've got trees and things around the rail line. So on rail, you only can wear the orange. You shouldn't be wearing the yellows.
Right.
In healthcare, colour plays quite a role.
Yeah, of course.
So we would like patients within the healthcare environment, and indeed the surgeons, to stay in a relaxed, peaceful, calm state of mind. And those greens and blues that we see on the uniforms of our healthcare workers designed to help with that.
Oh, wow.
And blue again has a big role in food. Actually, the food industry, contamination of our food is key. So blue is one of those standout colours. So you might recall seeing kind of people in catering with blue plasters, or we have blue kind of earplugs, hair nets, etc. For to stand out should we experience contamination. So lots of different applications of colour in the safety world as well. Thank you, Marianne.
Fabulous. That's amazing. Lee and Andy, thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting to you both. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. You're welcome. Cheers. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
I need to ask you, Andy, what song if would you have played if you entered a room every time? We're obviously not going to record this. I'm just intrigued.
I think I did give this. It's a really hard one to answer because I've got lots of different favourite songs, but I think
Your
it would
Vein.
be but that's simply the best. No, I think it would be Super Styling by Groove Armada.
Oh,
'Cause
you're
every
so
party,
cool.
every party you go to, you whack that on and it gets everybody up and kind of following you. So. We might have bust some moves to that at some point in some
Time if possible.
party in many years gone by. Sorry. I'll show you.
Wow, it took a whole new turn.